If you look at the companies that make this stuff, they're chemical providers. The flavor is meant to replicate something natural, but it is made of everything but something natural.
CBD is ubiquitous these days. You can buy it in all forms like balms, drops, oils, and gummies, and its popularity has grown so much that grocery stores now carry it. Today's guest has capitalized on this emerging market. Nick Miller co-founded Good Day, a company that sells CBD-infused coffee, tea, and seltzer water, because is it even 2019 if seltzer water isn't somehow involved? In this episode, we discuss his move from Facebook to entrepreneurship, the benefits of CBD, and how this hemp-derived miracle substance has made room for greater acceptance of natural anxiety and pain management.
Actually first moved to the West Coast to San Francisco. I took a job at Facebook. So Facebook moved me to San Francisco. Did just under a year in San Francisco, and then Facebook asked me to move to Seattle. The team that I worked for was based in Seattle, and the VP that I worked for was like, would you be willing to move up here?
What was it? Was it a different job or a different team?
Same job, same team, but most of the team was actually based in Seattle. They had just, once they moved me to San Francisco, they had hired me there because that's headquarters. Mm-hmm. And then eventually they were like, will you move up here? They hired a new like product VP that would run all of I worked on the games team. They would run that, and he was in Seattle also, and they were like, hey, will you move up here? Mm-hmm. I was like, no, I haven't. I've barely been here a year. I'm in San Francisco, not moving. But I was going up there about a week a month anyway, and basically what happened, I was up there one time, and I was like, you know what, let me just look at some apartments, like see what it would be like to actually live here. And I realized that rent was 50% of what it was in San Francisco.
That wasn't even my question.
Yeah, so rent was 50%. Then everyone reminded me that there's no state income tax in Washington. And the city and the office there is actually in the city versus I was living in San Francisco and commuting to Menlo Park, which was on average 3 hours a day commuting, hour and a half each way.
Okay. Oh my God.
So I would leave for work at 7:30 or 8, and I'd get home at 8:30 or 9 because I was in the office for 10 hours plus 3 hours commuting. So like,
did you see the city at all?
I was going to say, except on the weekends, I wasn't even really enjoying San Francisco anyway. And then I found out you get paid the same. Our rent was barely over half for pretty much the exact same thing in Seattle what it was in San Francisco. It's not like Seattle's cheap, right? It was
San Francisco's
so expensive,
yeah.
Exactly. And there's no state income tax. And my entire team was there, so it was easier for instead of traveling there a week a month, all my travel then became to, like, I went for a couple days a month maybe to San Francisco, and then it was interesting travel. I was like spending time in Southeast Asia and Latin America and stuff like that, which was way better.
Yeah.
Saved way more money, and turned out both Faith and I liked Seattle way more than San Francisco anyway.
I've not been to Seattle. Pacific Northwest is really high on my travel list, but I've been to San Francisco. It's awesome. It's so expensive.
Yeah.
But
it's crazy expensive.
Like
I think the other thing with San Francisco, like I worked in the tech industry. I was at Facebook. I had been in tech when I was here, and that's one of the reasons I moved out there. But literally everyone is in tech. Everyone is talking about the startup they're at or what they're doing at Google or whatever the case may be. And it just gets old.
Sounds really
There's
boring.
like no diversity whatsoever. The best part about San Francisco was actually when we were able to get out of San Francisco. Like, it was really easy to get to Napa. You can drive 15 minutes and be in the Marin Headlands. I'm a runner, so being up there is awesome. Mm-hmm. Like, you're close to Yosemite. You're close to Big Sur and stuff like that. So that was really nice, but I wasn't really enjoying San Francisco most of the time because I was commuting so much anyway.
The microclimate thing is cool.
Yeah.
It's like summer, right? Right outside. Like
yes,
you cross the bay.
So even within the city of San Francisco, like if you're on the south side of the city, like in the Mission, it might be bright and sunny and 75. And then if you're on the north side, like in North Beach or something, it'll be overcast and 62 degrees. It's like, even within the city, because of the hills and the way it sits on the bay, mm-hmm. is pretty crazy. But Seattle is a little bit like that too. Mostly, in the winter, it's 50 and rainy in Seattle. It's never raining hard. It's just overcast and misting all the time. But you can drive 30 minutes out, like east of Seattle, and you're in the mountains and it's snow and it's beautiful and there's skiing, snowboarding, started snowshoeing all the time, like all this cool stuff
What
that you
does
can do.
snowshoeing entail?
Snowshoeing is basically hiking, but in deep snow-covered
tennis
trails.
rackets.
So you have these snowshoes, which one are surface area, right? But two also have crampons on them so that you can actually get traction on the snow.
Okay.
So it's just like kind of harder hiking, I guess. But
Sounds terrible.
In the mountains, it's really pretty though,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because in the mountains there's so much snow and so much you couldn't access otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was one of the best things about the Pacific Northwest in general is it's beautiful, right? Like there's so much green. On a clear day in Seattle, we could see Olympic National Park, Mount Olympia, Mount Baker, Mount Rainier, and all the way down to Mount Hood. Amazon and Microsoft are there, so there's still lots of tech. Even in tech, it's hilarious. When you told someone you work for like Facebook, it was refreshing to them that you weren't at Amazon. Basically, if you weren't at Amazon, it was exciting. But there's still lots of people that do lots of other things. It's not all tech. San Francisco was all tech, and it got old really fast.
Sure.
So
So how did CBD and LA sort of steal you away from what sounds like a pretty good deal up there?
Yeah, it was great. I think I actually loved working at Facebook. It was a really great experience. I worked with some really smart people. I worked on was a gamer my whole life, and I worked on a games product, like live game streaming and stuff like that. But ultimately, I found myself getting very comfortable. Coming from a background of starting a company before, running it for 5+ years, ultimately the company was sold. I found that if I'd stayed at Facebook much longer, I would have gotten into that situation where I probably never would have left. Like, you get a nice equity package. It starts to add up. You start to get very comfortable. I worked hard, but it's a different lifestyle.
Do you know like the typical like lifespan of a Facebook employee? I mean, given all the perks.
I don't know what the actual, I'm sure they have stats on it. I
Sure,
don't know
yeah.
what the actual number is.
And if it was like common knowledge.
But
of
it
people.
is it's long, and they go to great lengths to both from a compensation standpoint and from a perks and lifestyle standpoint to get people to never want to leave. I can only imagine if that was your first job out of college, how you could ever go anywhere else other than maybe
couldn't.
like a Google. I don't know, because like you can literally drop your laundry off in the building and they have people that do your laundry and your dry cleaning, right? It's kind of crazy. All the perks and things that just make your life, their goal is to make your life easier. What they figured out is, especially at a company that size, hiring is hard and it's expensive. So even giving away all these perks, breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, cooked there at campus, is still cheaper than having a higher turnover rate and trying to hire more people. So it's pretty phenomenal from that standpoint. And also
the goodwill of having employees like talking about how wonderful they are as employers. I mean, you can't, that's got to be worth a ton of money.
And it's the reason that companies like Facebook and Google set up offices in Seattle, because they're able to, Amazon and Microsoft and these companies bring tons of talent to that city, but aren't as known for the sort of lifestyle and work experience that you get at some other tech companies. So they're able to hire a lot. I worked with a lot of ex-Amazon and Microsoft people, and those are great companies to work for. So you have to imagine to get all of those people to come over is, it says something about the company.
Sure.
But I found myself. So I personally was just getting complacent and comfortable. And I knew that if I didn't go out and do something again soon, it would get harder and harder over time, basically. So what I was looking for, I was starting to sort of brainstorm new business ideas, think about what I wanted to do. And I was looking, at this point in my life to go do something that I actually, believed in or cared about. And I'll tell you about where the CBD came from first, which is I have been on and off essentially an endurance runner. So run ultra marathons, 8+ hour obstacle course races, ultras, things like that.
No, thank you.
And when I have been I'm out of shape right now, but when I've been in the peak of my training, I try everything to keep myself from getting hurt. So I've done, dry needling, cupping, infrared, cryotherapy. It all works or helps to different degrees.
How is cryotherapy? I'm curious about that.
Cryotherapy, I actually really like it. It's one of the things that I'd say helped me. I was doing it a couple times a week when I was training heavily, particularly after really long runs. Like you run 20 miles and you have to run 15 miles the next day. It's really great. And it's never going to be as good as an ice bath, but it's much faster and much less painful.
Sure.
So like actually when I lived in Baltimore and was training, I used to go to Charm City Health over in Canton and do it all the time. So you can, so you can do it here.
Oh, wow.
And it's a lot cheaper here than it is in like LA too.
Everything's cheaper here.
So it was really nice actually. And I know they actually do a lot of like local athletes and football players and stuff too. But so all of those things did something, but I had the one problem that I actually had consistently when I am endurance running is IT band issues. So lots of stretching, hip stuff, the pain would manifest in my knee. But one of the things that actually helped was, CBD and cannabis in general have widely known sort of anti-inflammatory properties. Mm-hmm. So using CBD cream back way before it was popular when I was running on my IT band in my leg was one of the things that I actually felt helped me.
Where did you find it before it was ubiquitous?
It was, so I used to work in California a lot too. So it was easier to get out there. But it's always been kind of, if you were looking for it, it's always kind of been available on the internet, or at least as far back as I know, 5, 6, 7 years ago. And it was sort of popular in this niche, like endurance sport community, because people do try all kinds of stuff to help heal their bodies. So that's kind of where I found out about it, and I started trying it, and I was like, wow, this actually works. And that's how I initially sort of thought about the space. And when I initially was considering going into it, I actually was thinking about sort of sports performance and recovery. Like most recovery drinks are either taste terrible or are filled with not only the good things you need to replenish your body, like electrolytes, but also sugar, or if not sugar, fake sugar, erythritol, stevia, like all that stuff to try to make them taste better, and aren't really actually that healthy.
Is there something you could eat instead of drink it, or does it have to be like
kind
of specific?
You can. I mean, and it's just a matter of all this could be done like naturally through real foods too. It's just much harder. Like when you walk out of a race to go and eat a bunch of things that would replenish all of your electrolytes and all of your
like
everything you lost. Right, exactly.
Yeah,
it's more work. And
gotcha.
The sports drink industry is big, and that's why, you see a Gatorade or a Fit Aid or whatever. Mm-hmm. And more it's gotten better, but especially when I was looking at it, there wasn't a lot out there. And sort of coincidentally, when I was thinking about doing this and a couple of other business ideas, I had gone to New York for work and was meeting up just to catch up with the investor in my last company, in Parking Panda, that was based here in Baltimore, and was telling me about a couple of different business ideas. And when I said that, he stopped me and he was like, have you talked to Warner lately? Warner is one of my co-founders at Good Day. And I was like, when we're in the same city, we kind of catch up, but I haven't talked to him much. He was like, you got to call him. I talked to him literally 3 days ago, and he said something very similar to me. So I was like, wow, that's super weird. Mm-hmm. But I texted him, and we got on the phone a couple of days later, and he was like, yeah, I literally he had sold his last company to Cisco Foods and was thinking about leaving Cisco at the time to go do something very similar. So we started talking about it, and we ultimately landed on not sports performance, but what we're doing now, which is coffee, tea, and water, more because they're generally ubiquitous drinks that function throughout your entire day, every day, rather than, only for performance athletes.
The
right?
1% of the 1%
exactly.
that can do what you do, yeah.
Whereas like I drink, I wasn't a coffee drinker until recently, but now, people drink coffee or multiple coffees every day. Sparkling water is a huge trend in the ready-to-drink world. And, chamomile tea is obviously ubiquitous as well. Mm-hmm. And we were trying to pick things that not only were popular, but generally suited sort of our vision for what people sort of want and need going forward as well, which was, one, really healthy, clean ingredients. So everything we make is minimal ingredients, healthy. Like our coffee is fair trade organic coffee. It's a custom blend, filtered water, and CBD. And that's it. Even our sparkling water, where a lot of people use natural flavors, right, which is essentially...
Apparently it can mean anything.
Yeah, so we actually have a food scientist we work with to help formulate some of our drinks.
I was going to ask you, how do you... Because, what you were doing before is so different from this.
Yeah.
So how do you get into that world? I mean, how do you find the best people and the right people that can produce what you actually want and be up to your standards?
So a little bit of it is trial and error. A little bit of it is, as you get to know the industry, it's relationship based. And, I had been in the tech world. Warner, though he was at Cisco and has a lot of knowledge of sort of the food and industry space, was also more on the tech side. He'd sold a technology company to them. Mm-hmm. Our third co-founder, who also from Baltimore, all three of us are from Baltimore.
But you didn't know that, right?
I did not know that. I knew it before we started the business together, but I did not know it when we met in New York. So we had no idea originally. Was actually in the food and beverage space. So he had a finance background, but had lived in Miami running and working for a cold pressed juice company for a while that sold, had set up in Whole Foods, and actually was now running finance at a large co-packer in the New York metro area for food and beverage.
So that was a pretty good in.
Yeah. So he knew a lot of people and, sort of brings my background is mostly in sort of consumer products and operations. Warner's background is more in sales and marketing, and then he has the sort of the finance and food and beverage background. So it was like a nice, well-rounded thing. But yeah, you have to find people that are experts in this.
Sure.
And we worked with someone to help. Coffee was easy, right? We found really great high-end coffee and, use a custom brew, and it tastes delicious. But for something like sparkling water, it's a little more work. And if you're using a sort of more natural organic CBD extract, it has a flavor as well. It has a bit of a grassy, a bit of a bitter flavor to it, which I'll call it acquired, but most people, if they tasted it straight, wouldn't really want to keep drinking it. So you're trying to find this balance between having a really delicious drink and a healthy one.
Is most CBD flavor? I have like CBD drops, and one had I think there was a flavor, but the other one there wasn't, and it just kind of tasted like weed.
Yeah, so it's a little bit like that. Yeah. So we could talk a little bit more about CBD, but there's really generally, there's lots of different types and lots of different things, but typically you'll see either a CBD isolate or a CBD extract.
Okay.
Isolate is where you basically go into the hemp plant where all the cannabinoids exist, because there are almost 200 cannabinoids. CBD is one of the most prevalent and one of the most known in its effects. And you actually just isolate that and remove it from everything else. For a CBD isolate, you get more of a colorless, flavorless, and odorless sort of experience from it. But what you lose is sort of what people call the entourage effect often, which basically means it's only CBD. So you get the effects of CBD, but people, are still researching this, but generally believe that having the presence of some of the other naturally occurring cannabinoids enhance the effects. So when you use an extract, it's not just removing everything else and having only CBD. You get those very small amounts, but you get other naturally occurring cannabinoids. So cool. That actually tends to have more of a taste, though. That's where you'll get the drink, like if you put it in water, it would look a little cloudy. Mm-hmm. It has a color to it. It has a little bit of an odor to it, and it has that sort of weed taste that you're talking about, right? Okay. Which is that grassy, bitter taste. Yeah. And like I said, most people don't really like that taste.
I do.
So some people do, and I
like bitter. I actually
think I've drank enough of it now where it's almost like when the first time you have a beer and you don't really like it, and eventually it grows on you, you're like, wow, this is actually pretty good. Mm-hmm. So I think more of that will happen.
Well, it's also going in tandem with it making you feel good. So there's probably
I'm
something
sure
to be said about that.
You associate that in your mind eventually. But one of the things you still want to do is like you want to have a drink that's healthy, but you also want to have something that tastes really good. And for a lot of people, they don't like that bitter taste. So you're trying to, for sparkling water, especially if you just put carbonated water and CBD in a drink, it, for most people, wouldn't taste very good, which is why a lot of the beverages out there today have tons of sugar, or if not sugar, fake sugar. Mm-hmm. So you'll see a lot of erythritol, a lot of stevia, a lot of things to try to mask that, or a lot of natural flavors, right? And we actually asked the person, the food scientist we work with, what are natural flavors? Mm-hmm. He goes, I don't even know. I don't know what they are.
I read an article about LaCroix where they were saying, they say they have natural flavors, and then they won't explain what that means. And so the author of the piece was like, I don't think that they know what it means. I think that they were just told it's natural. And
I mean, if you look at the companies that make this stuff, they're essentially chemical providers, mm-hmm. right? It's anything but the flavor is meant to replicate something natural, but it is made of everything but something natural,
it's like
essentially.
Willy Wonka.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And, we wanted to steer clear of that, right? One, I think consumers are getting smarter and realizing that it is not natural and it's chemical and want to know what they're putting in their bodies.
Sure.
Two, it just doesn't taste as good as something real. While you can get something that is 0 calories and still tastes pretty good, like a LaCroix, it's not the same as having something that's real juice. So we went more of a with our sparkling water is not out yet. It's coming out in hopefully about 6 weeks or so. We went with more of a Spindrift type of profile, if you've ever had a Spindrift before.
Yeah, a couple calories.
Yeah, so, it has 30 calories, maybe 5 grams of sugar, but it's made with real juice or juice concentrate. So it's basically like you took a sparkling water, poured actual juice into it, and then added CBD. Mm-hmm. So when you look at the back of the can, all you're going to see is, it's citrus flavored. So you're going to see like a mandarin orange juice, a grapefruit, a lime, a little vitamin C, and then CBD and water. And that's it, right? So
great.
Both for myself, like I said, coming from sort of an endurance sports background, and Warner is very much health conscious. He's keto, intermittent fasting, very knowledgeable about sort of the gut health world and everything. It was really important to us to have something that would sort of fit our lifestyles, but also the lifestyles that we think people are moving toward, which tend to be healthier, but also was still delicious and that you'd still want to drink every day. So we went kind of through a lot of work and a lot more effort than maybe most other people would to try to have both of those and still be able to combine CBD.
Right.
Does
the CBD just kind of get dropped in, or is there like a process?
Yeah, so it's not too complicated, but basically without going into all the detail that even I don't understand, our CBD is, and this would be true of other ingredients too, is a nanoemulsion. So basically they take the CBD and they suspend it in a water-soluble oil, which for us is just coconut oil. So it's so little oil that it wouldn't even, like if you had a nut allergy, it wouldn't even affect you. Mm-hmm. But it's suspended in a coconut oil, and that allows, so when you pour it into a batch of coffee, for example, it doesn't like rise to the top or sink to the bottom, right? And it actually fully dissolves in the beverage.
Okay.
That way, like, even if it's sitting on a shelf, it's not like sinking to the bottom or something like that. You can drink it and it'll...
Yeah, you don't be like shaking up a seltzer water and it explodes, right? Oh, cool. Okay. And then I know, with weed, it's state to state and it's kind of crazy, and some states are far, far, far more advanced than others. But does it have similar regulations, or is it...
So CBD is in a bit of a strange place right now in that it is both more and less regulated. And what I mean by that is, so the Farm Bill that passed in December of last year made hemp federally legal as a crop. So you can, have a hemp farm registered through the Farm Bill with the federal government all over the country. Many of them are like ours comes from Colorado. There are a lot in Oregon, but they're elsewhere as well. And that is no longer a Schedule I drug. It is completely legal. You can grow it, extract it, sell it, do whatever you want with it. The part that is still, I guess, being regulated is the best way to put it.
Wait, hold on, let me back you up there. So you're saying in any state I could like grow a weed plant if I was only using it for CBD?
Or
marijuana plant, excuse me.
So they're both from so CBD and THC are naturally occurring cannabinoids.
Right.
They're different, and they're both from the cannabis plant, but they're different types of cannabis plants.
Okay.
So hemp is a specific strain of the cannabis plant that naturally has extremely low, almost no THC in it. So if you got a hemp plant and you just took it off the branch and tried to smoke it, you'd still get almost no THC. I think the federal, don't quote me here, but I believe the federal limit on it is 0.03%.
Okay.
So these plants have almost no THC in them when naturally occurring.
You could grow those specific plants
exactly.
and be under the radar and everything's cool. Or
yeah,
above
so
board.
You are above board.
Yeah.
You register with, kind of like you do for lots of different crops, but you register through the Farm Bill with the federal government, and then totally above board.
Cool.
You can have a legal farm. And that's all of our products come from Farm Bill certified farms. And though there's no organic certification for it yet, they actually all use organic growing methods as well. So no herbicides, no pesticides, none of that stuff. And do that totally above board. The thing that is still sort of being regulated is the use of CBD or hemp extracts, because, like I said, these more full spectrum ones are truly hemp extracts with mostly CBD in food and beverage. The FDA actually has publicly come out and said that they're in the process. They basically have a focus group, essentially, a group of industry experts and FDA regulators that have started meeting on it and are actually meeting regularly on it over the next several months so that they can come out with recommended guidelines for how it cannot, should, or should not be and used in food and beverage, and what the specific things like labeling requirements are for that, which, in my opinion, is a good thing. From a business standpoint, it's an opportunity in that, yes, we are operating before that's complete. So there's always a little bit of risk associated with that.
Sure.
Though really the FDA is looking heavily at people that are making wild health claims about CBD, right? One of the other reasons we picked coffee, tea, and water is we picked things where we believe the health benefits of CBD naturally enhance the function of the beverage itself. Coffee wakes you up. CBD just helps to mellow out that like jittery feeling that you can get from cold brew, right?
I don't even drink caffeine. I'm strictly decaf. But when I saw that...
So chamomile, right? Chamomile naturally helps you sleep. CBD has this natural relaxation that will also make it easier to kind of fall into bed and ease into the night, right? So we try to pick things that balance naturally with it. But you'll see people out there making outrageous claims like, using CBD will cure your cancer. There's some pretty crazy stuff out there right now. So obviously the FDA does not want that, right? Mm-hmm. And wants to prevent that from happening. So they're being particularly strict in those types of cases. But we're also working with, an attorney, for example, who's an FDA expert and is actually helping advise on what the CBD regulation should be. So we're trying to do everything really as sort of by the book as we can, even though the book doesn't exist yet, so that once these regulations are handed out, not only will we be in line with them, but we'll feel good about what we've been serving consumers.
Sure.
I think the big thing is, one, these crazy health claims that you're seeing, and two, potency and dosing recommendations. The World Health Organization has done some studies on dosing, and they've shown that you can use very significant amounts of CBD before any like meaningful negative health impact, generally speaking. But the bigger issue you're seeing right now is, our drink has 15 milligrams. And we've actually gone to great lengths to have multiple independent third-party labs verify that we have the amount of CBD we say we have in our beverages, so that, if anyone emailed us and said, hey, can you send us proof, or can you send us a COA, a certificate of authenticity, it's no problem for us to do that. Whereas...
How did you settle on 15? Was that just the recommendation?
Yeah, so we settled on 15 based on a combination of sort of industry standard, what people... what generally people are known to have a positive impact at, and the size of our beverage. Mm-hmm. Like you'll see other drinks at 25 milligrams, for example, but usually it's in maybe a 14 or a 16 ounce bottle. Ours is only an 8.4 ounce can. So it's a little bit more of a small size, potent, drinkable form. It's more like, I hate to use this as an analogy, but the size of a Red Bull can, right? So you know how much you're getting. Mm-hmm. And 15 is at that place where you should still notice the positive impact of CBD, but not get an overwhelming bad taste, for example, from it.
Right.
We really wanted to balance, like, at the end of the day, for a beverage company, taste is king, kind of, and we wanted to have things that taste really good.
Sure.
So it kind of sits in that sweet spot. The problem is, like you said, you have oil or tincture or something like that, and there are a lot of really great companies out there doing really amazing things. And same thing, if you emailed them or called them and said, hey, can you send me your certificate of authenticity or your third-party testing? They'd be able to do it in a second. But there are a lot of other people out there doing some really sketchy, shady things. And if you were to reach out to them and ask for that, you would just hear nothing, right? You get no notice. No. And there have been a couple that have been essentially busted when someone tests their potency and they say that maybe it's a 750 milligrams in a little bottle, and it's been less than 100, right? It's people... So the industry being regulated, I think, is actually a good thing.
I think it should be regulated.
There's so much misunderstanding.
My God. I mean, the money the state makes back alone is worth the regulation.
Of course.
Colorado is... I mean, my sister-in-law lives out there, and the stories they tell us about the amazing impact of that
Yeah, I mean, it goes even further on the true sort of rest of the cannabis world, the tax, revenue and things they're bringing in. Hey, Colorado is very progressive. In Denver, they've legalized, sort of mushrooms, essentially.
Yeah.
So,
again, I think if you legalize it all and you can regulate it, I mean, that's the best. But the shrooms one I was surprised about because driving on mushrooms would be like very, very dangerous.
So I can't claim to be the expert on hallucinogens or anything like that. All I know is places are starting to look into legalization, and there's been a resurgence in the medical community looking into the effects of microdosing these things.
Right, I've
to the
heard about
point where
microdosing.
you're actually not really impaired.
Yeah.
But they believe it has really positive psychological effects. Like I said,
not
an expert here.
I read that the word is inspired. You feel inspired all the time.
Yes,
so
that is what
pretty great.
It sort of like heightens your awareness. You feel inspired. There are many people more qualified in that than I am, but I do know that that's like a trend that's sort of following behind the cannabis trend.
Yeah.
That you're starting to see in select areas like
I have
Denver.
toddlers now, so by the time they're old enough to take care of themselves,
I
maybe I can do it.
I suspect that cannabis will certainly be federally legal by that point.
I hope so.
The psychedelics and the mushrooms, I don't know. We'll see.
Take time with that, yeah.
But yeah, the cannabis will certainly, when you look at just very general blanket surveys, it's something like 60+% of the U.S. wants federal legalization for cannabis now. So it's becoming politically, easier and easier to head that direction, which is why you see more and more states legalizing recreationally or at least medicinally, right? Like it's pretty widely accepted that there are a lot of great medicinal uses for cannabis.
Sure.
So, I can't remember the exact number, but it's I think 30 some states that have at least medicinal use. So you're already well over half the states in the country for that. So I think you're going to see more and more of it. It's, having lived the last several years in California and Washington, legal states, like you said, it is amazing to see the tax impact of things like that, as well as, frankly, just the consumer knowledge and understanding. One of the good things about legalization, and even in the CBD space, call it regulation by the FDA, like I said, is you get clear, understandable guidelines for consumers. So you know what you're getting, you know how much you're using, what the effect of that amount should be.
Yeah, it's not like this sketchball I did when I was 18 being like, oh, like this will like make you really hungry and tired or whatever.
Exactly.
I mean, just guessing what it's going to do for you.
And I think that, like I said, that's true even of CBD. So even though hemp is legal, having further regulation around it, so people... Still a lot of confusion. People think it'll get them high, right? People assume, hey, CBD, I can't use that during the day or if I'm going to work because I'm going to be high. Well, no, it's not going to get you high at all. It should have no THC in it, essentially.
Who do you recommend it most for? I mean, do you think it's for absolutely everyone, or do you think?
Yeah, I think that my general feeling on it is, for most people, there's very little downside from it. It is, I'm not a FDA researcher. I'm not a doctor. So, this is purely my opinion on it. But given the sort of known effects are things like anti-inflammatory, anti-anxiety, sort of relaxation and mood enhancement, they tend to not be things that are, they're not intended necessarily to treat some sort of specific illness or disease or problem. They're things that are sort of natural mood or life enhancers, right? Like, wouldn't everyone benefit from being like a little less sore after they say exercise, or a little more relaxed and less anxious? Like, I'd venture to say that most people at least would. So especially for our drinks, I would say it's really, I wouldn't tell you to start drinking cold brew if you have no caffeine, right? Because you're still going to feel jacked up on caffeine.
Right.
But if it's something that's a part of your natural sort of daily routine anyway, a nice sparkling water or chamomile tea or whatever it might be, it will generally be an enhancer of that. It will make the experience a little bit better. It will, help you relax at night a little bit more, whatever the case may be. Like I said, I think that, we're still a little bit away from a broad consumer understanding of the effects, and these things, like all things, will affect everyone a little bit differently. Caffeine, two people could drink the exact same amount. One person could go to bed 10 minutes later. The next person might be up for the next 2 days,
I would be
right?
like in the hospital.
Right, exactly.
My pupils dilated and I'm shaking. I just can't have it.
So
proceed with caution like with everything.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So your partners, as you mentioned, are from Baltimore, sort of serendipitously. Where you met them in New York.
That's right.
And how do you think the tech scene is a little bit different? Because you guys are all in California now.
So they're actually still in New York.
Oh, they're still in New York.
Yeah,
okay.
So we have offices in New York City and in LA.
Okay.
So we sort of have a bi-coastal thing going on. And actually, our company is set up to be fully remote. So we hire or are starting to hire people all over the country. Sort of with the advancements in video conferencing, tools like Slack, things like that, it's shockingly easy to work anywhere at this point and still have it, at least if you're intentional about it, still have it be a very productive work environment. When you have one person that's somewhere else and everyone's in an office, it gets a little difficult. But when everyone is dispersed, it's a little easier to be intentional about being remote and make it really productive. So we're everywhere, but they're in New York and I'm in LA. Each one is very different. And like I said, I was also in San Francisco and Seattle recently over the last few years as well. I think the thing about Baltimore is it's definitely much smaller. It's a smaller community, particularly in the consumer space. There's tons of amazing healthcare technology, biotech, pharma, cybersecurity, things like that coming out of Hopkins, Maryland, and sort of the DC Baltimore corridor. ZeroFox and others here have shown you can be wildly successful in those sectors in this city. There's definitely a lot less on the consumer side of things. So, consumer-facing mobile apps, tech startups, packaged goods, there's certainly some. One of the things I loved about it, and having run Parking Panda, which was a consumer application here, is because the community's smaller, it is very supportive. Like, it is much easier to sort of rally support from, be it local businesses, the rest of the entrepreneurship or technology community, even local universities, and things like recruiting talent. Like, there's much less competition, stuff like that. The downsides to it are certainly things like access to capital. There's, if you don't have an established network outside of the area, in places like New York, San Francisco, et cetera, it's certainly harder to get access to the money you might need to build a large consumer, in particular, company. Yeah. When you think about the world's biggest consumer companies, the Facebooks of the world, they had to be at a very large scale before they made significant revenue. Even Parking Panda, we had to do a lot of transactions before we were making significant revenue. And that requires venture capital and things to help you get off the ground and hire while you scale. And there's just simply less of that here. As there are more and more successful entrepreneurs here, I think it will, continue to grow. You've had some great successes like Millennial Media and, a few others. And as those people continue to reinvest in the community, it gets better. But it's, still both a smaller city and from a sort of technology and entrepreneurship perspective behind the large exits that exist, particularly in Silicon Valley, but even in New York. So I think there are advantages and disadvantages. I loved running Parking Panda here. We were able to hire amazing people that, we were one of the most exciting places they could work, right?
Were you based in Federal Hill?
Yeah, the office was in Federal. In fact, there's still an office. The company was acquired by Spot Hero a few years ago, and there's still an office in Federal Hill.
Right.
They didn't, force everyone to move or anything like that, which was great. The downside is certainly there's, like I said, less access to capital and other people going through the same thing. There's certainly, one of the advantages of when I started the company being in New York was that there are a lot of other people at the same stage sharing the same challenges that you could sort of knowledge share with and either bond or learn from through mutual experience. There's just a little bit less of that here. But like I said, I wasn't the biggest fan of San Francisco because that's all it is, right? There diversity in ideas and values and like different learning experiences is really valuable. And in San Francisco, this is my personal opinion, obviously most of the world's largest tech companies are there for a reason, one of that being capital, but like you're getting to the point where not only is living exorbitantly expensive, but everyone is doing the same thing all the time. So you get no access to anyone who has like a real diversity of experience.
Yeah. Well, and as those cities sort of become saturated in that way, do you think that these more mid-level cities will start to
get
the overflow?
You're already seeing a huge surge, like sort of growth of entrepreneurship and technology companies in particular in what were once considered second-tier cities, Chicago, Austin, things like that, at least from a tech standpoint, very large cities,
sure,
but growing in the technology community. And then you're seeing actually DC, and then you're seeing the next layer of cities becoming increasingly popular as well. So places like Baltimore, Detroit actually has like a really kind of growing, rapidly tech scene, Portland, Oregon, places like that. Because the cost of living is lower, the talent pool is still really strong and not being gobbled up by the Facebooks and Googles of the world. And they're cities that young people want to live in, right? Like people love Portland. People from this area love Baltimore. And people want to move to and have access to like great jobs that can keep them here. So it's like behooves companies to be in these places. I think for us in particular, one of the reasons I moved to LA for this business, one was partially personal. Like we had, been traveling to LA regularly and sort of fallen in love with the Venice, living a mile from the beach, having it be 75 degrees all year round. My dog loves to sit outside on the back patio in the sun, things like that. But also from a business standpoint, I was mentioning there's still a lot of education to be done of consumers in the cannabis world, both the sort of legal marijuana in California, but also the CBD world. But in California, it's much further along. People have the general consumer has a much stronger understanding of the differences, say, between cannabis and CBD, the benefits of CBD, why they'd want to consume it, how they might want to consume it, things like that. So when you look at, your most likely consumers as well as your most likely retailers, stores that would want to stock our product, for example, California is a much stronger and frankly much larger market than somewhere like Baltimore is. So, there are advantages of both. And, one of the things I love about LA versus San Francisco is it's a huge city, but and there's certainly large tech companies. Snapchat is there and others, but it's not primarily tech. There's still, for me, a really great sort of diversity of things that people do. The business is Hollywood there. So there's lots of people in Hollywood, but over in Venice, it's more tech heavy. There's lots of amazing CPG brands there.
In Venice it is, really.
Yeah, so they call Silicon Beach is sort of the area between LAX and Santa Monica. Basically that beach area between Playa Vista, Venice, Marina del Rey, Santa Monica is where Snapchat is. It's where Facebook has their office. It's where Google has their office. It's where most of the sort of other tech startups in the area are. There are even some like large gaming companies and things like that there. So you still get that tech vibe, but there's also lots of other CPG. There's lots of other people that are just doing all sorts of different things, and particularly in that area in the health and wellness space as well. So, there's everything from the plant-based jerky company that I was meeting with the other day, right? So it's mushroom-based beef jerky instead of actual beef, to, some of the city's best yoga studios that might actually want to carry our product, right? To some of the finest sort of gourmet grocery stores like Erewhon. So it's like a really good sort of culmination of all the things that fit well in sort of the CBD and food and beverage industry right now.
That was actually one of my questions. Are you working off of a retail model or a subscription model? How are you getting your product out?
Yeah, so we're a combination, I guess is the best way to describe it. But we launched our product direct to consumer. So you can actually go to our website and order a 7-pack to be shipped directly to your home. Yes, it's a 7-pack. We wanted to do something a little bit different. Going along the lines of CBD is most valuable when consumed regularly. It's one of these things where you get.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So.
Oh, I thought it was kind of a as needed thing.
So unlike a lot of other. A drug or an antibiotic or something like that where you build a resistance, some of the early studies are actually showing that the more regularly you use CBD, the more value you actually get out of it. So, if you're using a tincture, an oil, or having a beverage, if you do it once a day or twice a day, every single day, that's how you actually really get, like if you want the true anti-inflammatory effects, for example, using it once will do something, but using it regularly will help regulate that part of your body, your sort of endocannabinoid system.
I do it like once or twice a week with tea before bed if I didn't sleep well the night before.
Yeah,
but
and so for
just like do it every night.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So just, if you already are having a tea every night, for example, if you just drop it in there every night, it'll help you.
Guesswork out of it, I'll just buy yours.
Yeah, there you go. Our chamomile is actually coming out Labor Day. And that's part of the reason we're doing a 7-pack. One is it's unique and it's certainly valuable from a marketing standpoint. But two is, we are actually about to introduce subscription as well. And we figured, why short you a day, right? If it comes Monday morning, why wouldn't you have one for Sunday before your next package comes? So let's sell it in 7-packs.
Yeah.
And going direct to consumer really, or initially at least, really sort of allowed us to control the rollout, how fast we grew, make sure that sort of the business operations and logistics behind it were strong and were sound. So we didn't get into a place where you would order from us and you'd have to wait 6 weeks to get it. Where we are right now is, if you order from us, unless you order on, a Saturday night and have to wait over Sunday, you should get it within 2 days. In some places, it'll even be next day. And that's just with the regular shipping. So we now are looking at where we can start to expand to retail. So we're expanding directly to select retail, the folks that, particularly interested in carrying CBD, but actually even distributors and wholesale now as well. So one of the great things about the space is CBD is very popular right now, but we also, picked on trends in the sort of ready-to-drink beverage space, coffee, tea, water, that are rapidly growing themselves outside of CBD. So there's a lot of inbound interest from both retailers and distributors that are, we of course have a sales process where we go reach out to people, but there's a lot of people coming to us. It's not, we haven't finalized things yet, so I won't say their name, but actually not knowing we were from Baltimore, a retailer here in Baltimore reached out to me asking about stocking and selling our product. So
Baltimore gets its tentacles.
I called them back
there.
And was like,
Everybody's
hey, we're actually from Baltimore. Like I've been there before. I used to live right down the street from you. So actually you'll be able to find it here in Baltimore in stores soon.
I'm going to find out off
yes.
there. I'll keep it a secret.
And hopefully many more places, coming up as well. But yeah, it's, I think the great value for us in particular, but for a lot of brands in retail is, one, the accessibility to the consumer in sort of their everyday life. And two, I'll call it the ability to try the product, right? So we sell in 7-packs. It's hard to ship 1 can to your house. Doesn't make sense for us. Doesn't really make sense for you to have 1 can shipped to your house. But
or
if
the
it's
environment.
Or the environment. And we can talk about that. But, one of the reasons we use cans is because they're, much more sustainable than plastic, for example. And we're doing, we're certainly not the best yet. We're a very small company, but we're doing everything we can to be as sustainable as possible. And shipping singles would not be, for example. But, if one is in the cold section of the bodega or the grocery store that you walk into and you're looking for a cold brew and you can grab one and try it and see what you think, it then becomes much easier for you to go and, sign up for a subscription because this becomes your regular coffee. And, our price point is certainly on the higher side. We average about $6 for a beverage. But when you look at the other things, the non-CBD infused versions of what we're selling, high-end teas and cold brew coffees that use fair trade organic ingredients, you're typically seeing, $5 plus anyway.
Mike just spent $5 on a cold brew on the way here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, we think that
in a plastic container.
In a plastic container.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, aluminum is the most eco-friendly.
Mm-hmm.
Glass is good too, but shipping glass is not very eco-friendly.
No.
Or, it's safe in many cases. You have to go to great lengths in your packaging to make sure you don't break it. And plastic, while in many ways the easiest to manufacture, is obviously the least sustainable. But yeah, we want to give people the option to have access to these beverages in whatever way best suits their life. So if that's to have it delivered to your door every Monday morning, that's perfect. But if that's, your daily routine is to walk into the corner store next to your gym on a regular basis and grab a drink too, then that's great as well. So we want to be wherever, it's most convenient for you. And that gets easier and easier as, like I said, regulations become more clear, consumers become more familiar with what the product is and what it does and why they'd want to consume it. So it's a good time to be in the business. I
am going to bring this back to Baltimore because we are, in fact, a Baltimore podcast.
Of course.
Despite this is how fascinating this has been. This is all pretty cool. So we end each podcast with a recommendations.
Okay.
So I know you haven't been living here recently, but if you want to answer them anyway,
Sure.
we'd love to hear your
It's
thoughts.
only been a few years since I've been here.
Okay.
And like I said, my family does still live here.
And where did you live when you lived here?
So throughout my time in Baltimore, I spent a little bit of time in Mount Vernon. I lived in Fells Point for a few years, and then in Canton.
Mount Vernon, high five.
Yeah. And of course,
Violet.
Parking Panda's office was in Federal Hill. So
Right.
I sort of did the full tour of many different neighborhoods. Spent a lot of time in Hamden, never lived there, but I love it,
We're very similar. I'm in Hamden constantly, but we
Okay.
don't live there. Okay, so cool. Then you're going to have good answers. Okay, where is your favorite place to have dinner?
All right. I'll give you sort of two different things on this one. One is there's a tiny little place on the corner of Linwood in Canton called Chris's Seafood that is one of my favorite places to get crabs, steamed crabs.
Okay, I'm writing
it's
that down.
in the city, but it feels more like it's in Dundalk. It's just, and not in the best way possible. Like, it has some of the best steamed crabs that you can get, in my opinion, at least in the city. So I lived not far from there and used to get food from there all the time. And then from a purely, straight up dinner perspective, not to be cliche, but I was always a huge fan of Woodbury Kitchen when I lived here.
It's a popular answer.
Spike's food is some of the best in the city, and for good reason. But everyone knows that, so my recommendation would be to go get steamed crabs or even a crab cake from Chris's in Canton.
All right. Favorite place to get a drink and or favorite cocktail?
Okay. I'd say my current favorite, so when I lived in Fells Point back in the day, very unfortunate at this point, but I lived right by One Eyed Mike's, and One Eyed Mike's was my neighborhood bar back when Mike still owned it, and it was a true neighborhood family bar that also had great food. We could walk in and no matter how crowded it was, if they knew you, they'd make sure they found a place for you at the bar. I think I went through 12 bottles of Grand Marnier. This is over years. I wasn't drinking a ton.
I was going to ask about that.
This is over years. This is over years. It's not like it was crazy.
It's a bad month.
Yeah, but One Eye Mike's, and still to this day, I when I come back, what I remember, I still love Lobo, which was, started by the GM, and Mike was an investor in that business as well. I think that they just do a great job with making you feel welcome, particularly if you sit at the bar. Best bartenders, things like that, I think are kind of my favorites.
Cool. And then one more food question. Favorite place to go on a date?
Man, that's it.
You can repeat an answer if you want.
I wasn't dating when I was here, really.
Okay.
And Faith and I have been together since. So I don't.
Worth mentioning, Faith is in the studio.
Yes, Faith is in the studio as well right now.
There's a little pressure.
Oh, that's a great, and that's actually a great restaurant too. There's a little Peruvian place downtown called Puerto 511 that is also BYOB, correct? So you can actually take a bottle of champagne in there with you, and they'll literally throw it in their freezer for you and keep it cold. It's this tiny little Peruvian place run by a Peruvian family.
We rented it out for my birthday one year.
Okay.
Not rented it out, but we there's only
a few seats in there.
That sounds really fabulous.
Exactly.
Right. No.
You can.
Oh my God, that's right. You were there. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot about that. That's crazy. It was 3 years ago. Yeah. Ooh, I'm getting older. Puerto 511 or 511, however you say. Yeah, there's only 10 or 12 seats.
It's tiny.
So.
And you're the kitchen is basically like a townhouse kitchen right next to you.
Yeah, so then we didn't rent it out. We just had a big table.
That's the whole restaurant. Same thing.
Yeah, okay.
That's the whole restaurant. So that is definitely one of my favorites as well.
Good spot. All right, favorite place to be outside?
So I'm a big runner. So I think my favorite place, during the week, loved running just around the water. I could run all the way from Canton to Fort McHenry and back. If you needed to get a nice long run in the city, it's amazing access to sort of just an easy and beautiful place to run. And then, there's some really beautiful state parks. I grew up in Rock State Park, which is not terribly far from the city. And getting outside to hike and run in those places that we have access to is sort of my favorite. But I think, as a runner, being able to literally walk out my door and sort of run along the promenade around the harbor was my favorite thing.
So the whole city is your favorite place to be outside. That's what I'm hearing. Okay. And then the final is favorite place to buy a gift.
Favorite place to buy a gift. I think it depends on what you're buying, of course, but and assuming it's still there, I haven't been recently, but right on Cross Street, there's a little store called So Botanical, I believe.
I love So Botanical.
Yeah. So an old investor in Parking Panda, it's him and his wife that own that store actually, and they make all of their own soaps, aromatics, like all of oils, all that stuff.
Nick's not the first person to say that either, is he? There have been a couple of people. That's a good spot.
Yeah. So. The Cangelosis that own that store are great, and it's one of the truly locally owned, locally made, really high quality products, at least as far as I know, in the city. So that would definitely be my recommendation.
Yeah, I bought this really beautiful diffuser from them, and about 3 months in, my daughter, she will be 2 next month.
Okay.
Just picked it up and looked dead in my eye, and she just dropped it.
Oh no!
And it just shattered, and I was like, I was not happy with her.
It's great for them because you have to go back and buy another one now.
Sure. Well, maybe someday. Well, thank you so much. I've learned a lot, and I wish you all the luck. It's a really cool company.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's good to be back in Baltimore.
Thank you, Nick. Their products are rolling out this fall, and you can visit drinkgoodday.com or follow Drink Good Day on Instagram to learn more. For past Hey Baltimore episodes and info about everything happening downtown, go to our website, godowntownbaltimore.com. Hey Baltimore is edited and produced by Mike Evitz and made possible by Downtown Partnership. Our theme music is by Super City, and I'm your host, Megan Eisenach. Thank you for listening.